Hey folks, this is Jake from So We Flow, and you're listening to the Why We Move podcast. Join me as I speak with incredible movers from diverse disciplines to share their stories and give you practical and inspirational advice on movement and living a happy, healthy life. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, a fanatic or casual, these conversations are for anyone passionate about movement, their minds and their bodies.
It is like, as a business, it's limped through all of this. Do you know what I mean? It's like really limped through, and we did all right. We did okay with the online stuff in the early days of the pandemic, and that kind of helped us keep going. But it's just before Christmas, I sold a little bit of the company to keep it going, basically, because I wasn't sure if we were going to reopen after Christmas, which was a little bit stressful. So it's got a sort of second chance, and I think looking at the way things are in England, this Omicron thing is kind of the beginning of the end, isn't it? It's like, everyone's getting it. Not many people are dying. Hopefully, it heralds the beginning of normal contact and people being in spaces.
For sure.
Fingers crossed. So, it's been a tricky one because it's been 10 years, and I love it, but I'm quite a little bit removed from it now. I'm sort of on the air travel's not as easy as it used to be, so I'm not coming back and forth that much. So I've got a bit more. I've got a bit more distance. So I've let go of a lot of the running of it to other people, which is actually a really healthy thing to do, because
for sure,
when you start a business, you're not always the best person to carry it on. You can't always see its faults, can you? It's
I think I'm the same, really. I think I'm obviously not as far down the line as you, but you do almost become the business, like the business is you, and getting rid of that ability and actually like accepting it and actually realizing that maybe someone's at certain parts of it. It's really, really hard to do, but it's powerful, and it's in most cases it's the best decision as well.
Yes. But a hard thing, because I think a lot of people who make purpose-led businesses, do you know what I mean? Like your business, like my business, it has a purpose beyond just the making of money. It has a message and it has an ethos, and when we make businesses like that, we put so much of ourselves into them, don't we? And what we end up doing is binding. I say this for myself, and I kind of imagine this is the case for other people as well, that we bind a lot of our self-esteem into making something purposeful in our lives, and that makes it good and makes it rich, and it makes it beyond just cash, but it's also what it makes it harder for the founder, and also it's kind of that way that burnout lies, isn't it? Because if you're bound up with the things you're making, it's success, it's living or dying has a massive effect on your daily happiness levels, doesn't it? So, so it's a slow process of me going, okay, I'm gonna step back a little bit. I'm gonna release control of this. I'm gonna release control of that, and trust that there's that there's something else beyond that,
Yeah, for sure. I think, how did you find it then, as obviously during COVID and stuff, Fetch being like a small independent business? Do you think that worked against you during COVID? Seeing you didn't have the big or like fitness places had stuff to fall back on, right? But obviously with that, they have that bigger space and more upkeep. Where do you think that put you during COVID and stuff?
I think initially we did really well out of it, because we were like a support hub for so many people in that time. So many of our community lent into the studio and the teachers and everything we were doing at the time, that it became like this kind of bizarre, not bizarre because it's the way life is, but it's like this amazing sort of reciprocal giving, if you like. Mm-hmm. You know, we were collecting stuff for the food banks and stuff like that, and we were giving away yoga to people whose income had collapsed, and the only connection they were getting was through Zoom and this kind of daily ritual. And I think, you know, on the other side of that, people were like, oh, well, I don't want to see when life goes back to normal, what do I want to see? Do I want to see, you know, David Lloyd's and like F45s everywhere? Or do I want to see my local space run by this family and, you know, this community and stuff? So people were, you know, they were invested into what we were doing, and they stuck with us through it, and that kept us going. And I just think it's been so, like, on the other side of that, it's been so long and so many mixed messages, particularly in the UK, that it's an endurance game, you know, and people have only got so much stamina, you know, with this kind of thing. So I think we'll make it by the skin of our teeth.
Yeah, for sure. It has been like a strange dynamic, and obviously when things like ebb and flow business-wise, it's easy to go, it's because of X, it's because of Y, it's because of Z. And I think, like, especially during like the first lockdown, it was kind of easy to trace down periods or up periods. But then kind of as it's gone on for, what is it, like 2 years nearly now, It's been harder to like rationalize why something might not be working and necessarily like base it on COVID and go, oh, well, people aren't money at the moment, or people aren't going out as much. And I think that's been a bit of a, for want of a better way of saying it, a bit of a head fuck for people in businesses now, especially in like the health and fitness and wellness business as well.
Yeah, massively. I think, you know, when everything went on, certainly for my business, everything went online. It's a massive game changer, isn't it? It takes the boundaries off. There's no walls to the studio anymore. So, you know, it was, and there was, and there still kind of isn't anywhere to hang your proverbial hat. You know, you can't, like, before you'd be able to go, oh, well, you know, January you're going to be busy and this is going to happen. And then like in the summer, people go on holiday and, you know, this, that, and the other. You can't do that anymore, can you? You can't predict anything, you know. So I think whilst in your rational business mind, that is, you know, it's chaos and it's hell, isn't it? But
yeah,
there's another part of us that's like, well, you can't predict anything anyway. And so what have you got to do with your life, right? You've got to do the things that you love and you're passionate about, irrespective of the outcome. You know, It's like it's a big, massive lesson of staying in a sort of higher space rather than sinking down into fear and the what ifs and the stuff that I can't predict and the stuff I can't control, you know? So it's
absolutely.
a big challenge for everybody, especially in this space, you know.
And that stands true, like, for any kind of business, really, because how many times do you hear really successful people saying, you know, I made all this money and it didn't change anything. And I realized I had to go back to the core of why I started doing this. And that's actually what they're always chasing, regardless of the financial outcomes.
Yeah. And quite often the thing that you're looking for is right. Well, it's inside. It's already there. Do you know what I mean? Because you're having an affinity with it. You know, you have the thing that you're trying to externalize. You know. Yeah,
sure. So I think I kind of know the story, but it'd be good to hear the story of like how you got into yoga specifically, I guess, and then decided to open a studio?
Yeah, sure. So in a nutshell, I kind of, God, when was it? About 2005, I was, I'd made a record in my early 20s. I toured around different parts of the world, DJing and, you know, performing with a band. And I ended up, I was living in Brighton at the time and ended up running some clubs. And that was a path to trouble. Do you know what I mean? So I ended up meeting a girlfriend, or getting with a girlfriend who was kind of like raw vegan yogi practitioner, and I was a bit of a mess. And she was like, "Look, I'm going to take you to this yoga class and see what you think of it, because you know you're going to quit smoking, right?" I was like, "Okay, I'll go to the yoga class." And went to this yoga class, and it was my friend Jim Tarrant who was teaching it, who's gone on to be one of my most biggest influences in my yoga practice, my teaching. And he was really, there was no edge to him. There's no ego about his, what he was offering. And I think if there was, I would have been out the door and never come back. But I sat there on about 12 different blocks trying to sit cross-legged in agony, and he was propping me up and making me feel good about it. And by the end of the session, I was like, this is the magic. It had within it everything that was exciting for me about music, and it was transcendent. At the time, it was kind of countercultural as well. It was awesome. It was, it had the philosophy, it had the movement, and so I just threw myself into it wholeheartedly.
And this is something that's actually come up podcast loads, and I'm really interested to get your take. Why do you think individuals that have potentially had a past or been in like not just music, but like that kind of hedonistic lifestyle, why do you think they find such an affinity with yoga? Because it's, like, I'm sure like it's super common.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? It's I think it's the transcendence. I think it's the, music takes you out of whatever you're stuck in. Do you know what I mean? Whatever small aspect of your life that you're stuck in, your core beliefs and your personality and your coping mechanism for whatever disappointments life has thrown at you, right?
Yeah.
And music has always been a way that people have lifted themselves out of that, like forever, and I think yoga has the same. It has the same properties to it. It's like, we go and we practice, and at some point within that, we forget about the smallness. We forget about this is the way I think the world is. We leave our expectations about the world behind, because we sort of pop up in this space of like freshness. Mm-hmm. Except it's not new. It's always been there. It's innocence and it's essence, and yoga is a portal to that, and music is also a portal to that natural essence, that innocence,
Yeah, for sure. I think that I kind of the same thing. Time I practice yoga, it was the first time that I'd taken myself to this like different place without any assistance. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And yeah, I knew it was possible before then, and it feels clear, and it feels like things make sense almost in that moment. And I think that's the thing that I wanted to hold on to when I do a practice, whether it's yoga or anything else, to be honest.
Yeah.
But what's your thoughts on it? Do you think it becomes over time? Because I think I find it harder to get to that place nowadays than I did in the early days.
Yeah, 100%. I think like we said, like we're just saying, was like, like the thing that happens, that gateway through, the gateway from the kind of the conditioned mind, isn't it? It's your habitual trains of thought, the way you expect the world to be, right? And that's kind of like most of the time that's how we live our life. We have a sense of how the world is. This is what we expect when we open our door. We walk past the flowers because we know they're there, and we just, it's like, and we're in this kind of mental, time-based consciousness. Do you know what I mean? So like, yeah, it's like, either I'm looking back into the past with nostalgia or regret, or I'm looking forward to the future with excitement or worry, right? It's like we're stuck somewhere in between those four quadrants. And so if if yoga is familiar for you, and your practice is like, I don't know, the same 36 poses, day in, day out, then, you're going to be able to do those poses whilst thinking about your tax return.
Yeah.
Aren't you? Of course you are, because it's a given, and so the opportunity to pop off into the infinite diminishes. That doorway gets smaller because expectation kicks in, right? I think, if you liken music or yoga to any experience that takes you out of yourself, out of your small self and into your bigger self, like, I don't know, like going out and seeing like some mountains for the first time, or a sunrise or a sunset, or like, whatever is beautiful in nature, you stand there and you're like, you disappear, but you haven't gone anywhere. You're still there, but you're not the small you. And I think from a teaching perspective, there's a point to repetition. It helps us grow, and it gives us a sense of progress, but progress is still in the small part of ourselves. Progress is still a time-based notion, isn't it? It's like, I get from here to here, and it doesn't resolve itself. It doesn't end. It's not, it just keeps more dissatisfaction, almost, even on a small level. It keeps more dissatisfaction. But I think, from a teaching perspective, a yoga teacher has a few things up their sleeve. They have like surprise, right? Yeah, like novelty, right? You get people doing something completely out of step with what they thought they were going to do in a yoga classroom, and then all of a sudden, faces are smiling. People are like laughing at themselves. They're not stuck in that small, personality-driven part of themselves. So I think once you get into that point where you're not popping off into the infinite anymore, it's perhaps time to go down some different pathways.
Yeah.
Like when I moved to Ibiza a year ago, and I had this freshness, and I came in with this freshness, and I started writing music for the first time in like 10 years. So like, I haven't used to make records before this. And because of all this newness, I was like I wasn't in my little self and my limited self. I was in my big, expansive, can do anything self, and I've tried to keep that going with a more or less successful degree by going somewhere new every day, by going down a road or a path or into a forest or onto a beach that I've never been to before. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
yeah,
that experience, it's that newness that takes me out of the small me.
Yeah.
And it's not to say you can't find that in a regular practice, in a sequence, but you have to look, in between the fibers of your muscles and in the feelings in between your ribs, and you have to go into the somatic world. because that's ultimately where, yoga takes us through that as a door as well, doesn't it? We start in this kind of dense and this gross way of practicing where it's perhaps quite physical, and it's about attainment, and it's about our body and feeling good about our body, and there's nothing wrong with this. But that, if we stay in that point, then it empties out very quickly. There's not a lot of soul. So we either kind of, find something else and something, new to go to, or we hopefully keep going. And what happens when we keep going from that layer, it's like, okay, well, there's feeling. There's the things that I'm built of, and that is, as a practitioner, if you can get into those nooks and crannies and into these little bits and to be with those feelings unconditionally, I think that's where it gets interesting. But to hold space for that, you have to perhaps have time and maybe even a teacher who's gone there before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is definitely something that a great teacher can bring to a person. Because I've since I've moved to Cornwall, I'm not going to a studio. Like, everything's self-led, and as human beings, it's our nature to become habitual with the things we do, right? Everything to make it easier, and we switch, like you say, we switch off. Like, when I walk to my office, I walk past the sea every day. Do I look at it every day? Really look at it?
Yeah.
Very rarely. And today, the sunrise was insane. It was like crazy pinks, and for the first time in probably like weeks, I actually looked at it and stopped, and I was like, holy shit, that is beautiful. And it took something like that to really appreciate how amazing it was that I live so close to the sea and how beautiful it is every day. And when I first moved here, for months I was thinking that, and then it just kind of slowly tapers, and your mind almost like ignores stuff that's useful to you anymore, isn't it? From the stuff that is either, I guess, like in a primal sense, like either like a threat or something that could potentially influence you in some way in the moment.
Yeah. And
I think your art of going somewhere new every day is awesome. I'm actually going to take that on board because, like at the moment, I usually work till the afternoon, like 2:00, and then I just have family time then. So like me and Axel hang out, and we always go for a walk. Like unless it's pissing it down, like we'll go to like the local beach or go for a walk in the woods or something. But we do actually do like the same thing, and it's actually made me I have actually picked up on myself recently, realizing I'm not really there. Like, I'm just thinking about stuff, and it's crazy that we do that, isn't it? Because the reason I've separated that time every day to do those things is to give Axel like 100% attention and give him exposure to all these different environments. And I'm not even embracing it fully and letting myself sort of become absorbed, because it's just become habitual.
Yeah.
And I think switching it up even a little bit is the way to keep that momentum, that presence, that moment almost.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. It's skill and a practice in itself, I think, to maintain your innocence. That's what it is, isn't it? It's innocence, is that the right word? Awe and wonder.
Yeah.
To maintain awe and wonder in the world is a practice and a discipline. But it's also it's where everything comes. It's like awe and wonder is where imagination, and therefore the things that are manifest in the world, the things that we can create, come from.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll go back to that moment when, was it Jeff? Did you say? Yes, your first teacher, Jim.
Yeah.
You were from all these blocks. So how does a man go from 12 blocks to opening a movement space?
Well, I'm still on 12 blocks. Still on 12 blocks. No, I went away and I did my teacher training, and was super enthusiastic, and and I came back to London, and I started teaching. At the time, it was like yoga wasn't as popular as it is now, and there weren't very many male teachers teaching in London. There were like like a handful, maybe two handfuls, and so I set about getting some experience before I could teach in yoga studios, and I taught everywhere I possibly could. I taught at like NHS Trust. I taught in like girls' schools in Camden, and taught. I had one class that was all blokes, and it was mostly like music producers, so that was hilarious. And everyone went to the pub afterwards and got smashed, which is a bit bad. But yeah, I taught loads of places, and I would spend most of my time traveling. And also, it's quite a lonely task, jumping on tubes and bikes and everything to get across the city and rock up and be connected with people for an hour, but then not see them again for another week, And I had moved up from Brighton. In Brighton, I was going to a couple of yoga studios there, and it had that community element, and you'd see, the same people every day. You'd ask how their life is, blah, blah, blah. And for me, who was the rest of the time making music in my room or in my studio, where I don't see people every day, it was invaluable social contact, So I moved to London. I'm starting to teach. I'm traveling around. I'm still making records and music for advertising. I'm going to my studio, and my social life is kind of like there's blokes like me in anoraks who nod their head and stuff like that, and wear backpacks and shit. And so a few things just fell into my lap. Like I, found this place, worked, did a really good deal. My yoga teacher, Vidya, came to me with a brown envelope of cash and went, "Give it me back when when you can," as in
amazing.
No excuses. Here you go. And we started it, and it was like, I think it was intentional, but it was interesting how it came out, because it came out like clubs, like the ethos of like late 90s, dance music and club culture. It was like everyone's welcome. It's just a room, it's a light, it's a feeling. Everyone's welcome, whoever you are. Come in. And that was the vibe that we had, and that was at odds with the kind of like purple and teal and patchouli and like holier than thou, and I can't talk to anyone because I'm so fucking spiritual, vibe that was yoga studios in my general experience until that point 10 years ago. Nowadays, there's lots of places like ours that are they're quite informal, and there's a whole wellness thing that's taken off and what have you. But I think we genuinely did something quite different 10 years ago.
And how did it look when you first started it? Because obviously it's an awesome, beautiful studio now. Was it always that way, or was it pretty raw at the beginning?
At the beginning, it was pretty raw, yeah. It was it's the cheapest possible chipboard composite that made up the floor with loads of polyurethane lacquer, cheap foam mats in like shipping containers, and bits of old furniture we could recycle. Like we did it on, we were winging it on a few quid, and but I think that's the beautiful thing, is like you can do stuff like that when things are new, kind of. And people love it,
Yeah, of course. And what was London Fields like at that time? Because obviously now every man and his dog knows London Fields. But even when I moved to London, I moved to go. London Fields happening, but I wasn't that interested in it. Like I didn't really. I kind of knew there was something there, but I wasn't it wasn't a big deal to me. What was it like back then when you first started?
It was, I mean, anyone who's old school London Fields will tell you that 10 years ago isn't old school enough,
Yeah, of course.
It was, like when you open a yoga studio, you're basically gentrification. You're like the boom, like it's like a tent peg of gentrification going into the ground, you know. But if I think about who came to the studio and moreover the people who were on reception, you know, like we'd have, actually that's not true. Maybe, is that true? We would, I'm trying to think if it's just me that was younger or just was everyone else younger. But I think everyone else was younger, because it was more affordable to live in that part of Hackney.
Yeah.
And we were, you know, I couldn't do what I did 10 years ago now with the cash that I started my business for £4,000.
Yeah.
And start a business for £4,000 in Hackney nowadays, you know,
No,
you need
no.
Exactly. So it's it was, there were more opportunities. The people who we were meeting were, you know, a lot of them were people who were working part-time jobs, or they were yoga teaching part-time, and they were artists, or they are artists. And I think that was the difference. It was a bit more socially and economically mixed, in truth.
Yeah. And was it just yoga at the start?
Just yoga, yeah.
Yeah. So how did it kind of evolve? Like, what was the process in scaling it up, and like obviously in like movement styles and just putting more money back in? Like, how, I think it's always interesting for people to know how businesses grow, and that it's not always like amazing from the start, right? There's a hard journey on the way.
Yeah. Well, we had we had the beginner's luck, and we happened to do the right thing at the right time, I think. And I had and I can't underestimate this, I had such a good core crew of teachers at the beginning of our journey who were really up for it, who were really connected. We'd all go to each other's class, and we'd all be learning as a group of teachers, you know, and that just kind of snowballed. You know, people were doing mad stuff, and like it was really, really cool. And there was not a lot around. You know, we didn't have lots of yoga studios on the doorstep, so this is where people came, and we didn't even advertise it. There's like a couple of flyers. You know, it was word of mouth, and I think that gives people a kind of sense of having discovered something for themselves. You know, like we're not shoving it in your face. We're not advertising. You know, you're not popping up on your feed all the time. So people discovered it, and when you discover something, it becomes yours. You know, and that went on for years, and it was great. You know, I had a little family. It was just me and Sophie and my first son Duke at the time, and we had it was a really good life, actually. You know, we didn't work too hard. We travelled lots, and it was really cool. And then we decided, you know, well, my ego decided to expand. So we got another studio, and then we took the building over next door. And it was, I think that was at the time where other places were popping up, like Block and people like that. And, you know, we never set out with a plan. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have investment. We were just kind of making it up as we went along. And I think when we expanded, it became a lot harder work for us, you know, to compete with, you know, organizations were perhaps a lot more slick in their delivery and about, you know, and having different experiences in the world of business before doing what they were doing, you know. So we had to, you know, shape up pretty quickly, and it was quite tough. But on a positive note, you know, for me as a person, I was getting into calisthenics. I got into calisthenics. I was lifting weights and practicing yoga, and then realised that, you know, you can't lift loads of weights and practice yoga because they kind of cancel each other out a little bit. And a friend of mine, Darren Onijekwe, Bodyweight D, got me into calisthenics, and from then on we were like, okay, great, this is what we need. You know, this is what is a fantastic accompaniment to your yoga practice, you know, because the truth is, you know, you can go to a yoga practice and you might do 5 or 10 chaturangas in a session, but that's like 5 or 10 half push-ups, so you've either got the capacity to do that or you haven't. And so a lot of people who don't have the capacity to do 5 or 10 half push-ups, you see them winging their shoulders forward, and we're like, actually, yogis need some strength. They need, because as a practice, even like your dynamic rocket yoga, what have you, it's not going to, it's not a strength-based practice, So for me, it was like, okay, let's give the yogis something else. Let's give them stuff that they're not doing, like pulling motions. And then obviously, as you know, the world of movement is, it's a fascinating place, and it moves fast, and it's a dialogue, isn't it? It's conversational. People get together and they share and they influence each other, whereas yoga tends to come from one or two key proponents, and then it's sort of passed down from top down. It's quite a top down thing, whereas movement is by its nature bottom up. It's feel and do, investigate, explore, use your own body as a laboratory, and then let's go from there and share what we know. And I think movement culture is so necessary for yoga to evolve beyond where it has come to. It's kind of at the right time, But also I think that movement culture it's fantastic in terms of what you can do with your body and the way it moves, but it doesn't have the depth and the maturity to address the somatic and the philosophical like a yoga practice does. And I think where it gets really interesting for me is the space in between those movements and those cultures. I think it's really fertile.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're in an incredible time when it comes to kind of the transcendence between all these different disciplines. Like all the barriers are seeming to break down and everything's merging together. And to be exploring movement at this time is pretty incredible, really. Like I feel more liberated. I move not because of capability, but just because psychologically I'm not putting all these things I'm doing into boxes. And it's an amazing feeling, because for so long I felt like, Monday I do yoga, Tuesday I do calisthenics, like all this. I had so much regimen, and I almost felt like wrong for blending them together. But now I don't have, in my mind, I have none of those boundaries whatsoever. Like it's all just the same thing. And I think almost, it's a controversial topic, right? But one could argue that the yoga we practice is nothing to do with actual yoga, right? It was just to describe something similar to what the roots of yoga are, whatever. That's controversial as well, whatever they are. And I think almost that title held it back for a long time. And especially in terms of the physical part of it, I think it's from transcending the boundaries and going into other areas, because there was these rules that people considered gospel because they were ancient, and it turns out that they probably weren't that ancient anyway. And
exactly.
And I've had conversations before with people that are sort of individuals, I won't name them, but who are very into the kind of true like meaning of yoga, and don't look on what modern yoga is. They look on that as almost like a cultural appropriation in a way. And I remember the individual I'm thinking of has said that they're just doing movement or mobility or strength, or that's what the yoga is. And I do something that calling it yoga has been like a limiting belief for the whole practice. What's kind of your thoughts on that?
Well, I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying I do, but a lot of people don't know what yoga is. Right? It's like it's this kind of like Chinese whispers or Indian whispers, right? And it's you know, yoga is, you know, it comes out of India, and it's quite Indian in the sense that it's quite amorphous and changing, and there are 100 million different narratives that fit somewhere and into this space, you know, and you've got to be quite. It's like you can't use the rational, logical mind and put together a really easy teleological history. It's impossible because there are so many different influences. You got to kind of sit back and take a widescreen vision and go, well, what has remained constant throughout, you know, let's say 2,000 years or whatever it is, you know, whatever period of time, what has remained constant in this ever-changing amorphous world of yoga? What themes have run concurrent throughout, regardless of whether it's been like Lululemon rocket yogis or like wandering sadhus standing on one leg for 10 years, you know, like what stays the theme, right? Freedom is what the yogi timelessly seeks in some way, even if they don't know it and can label it as such. It's freedom, right? Freedom from what? Freedom from the small personality, from the expectations, from the stuckness that we experience as human beings on a daily basis. Dead simple, freedom.
Yeah.
The other thing that is like the other pillar that makes it yoga is, and I would say union, but union is so, it's kind of like woo, it's like, oh, union of all, you know, it sounds a bit lofty, right? It sounds a bit conceptual. But if we say intimacy, right? Well, intimacy with what? Intimacy with my own flesh and my bones and my own feelings and my own thought patterns, and intimacy with, you know, the ground underneath me and the air that I'm, you know, part of, and my community and the ecology, you know, outside my front door, but also inside my house. You know, it's like, yoga is about noticing the intimacy that is part of everything in our lives, whilst at the same time turning ourselves towards freedom and away from stuckness. And that for me is like, after, you know, like 15 years, which isn't a long time of being a practitioner, it's like, that is what I believe and what I think it's about. And so therefore, what is in service to those two pillars is yoga. That's my definition. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're in service of freedom, if you're in service of intimacy, then you're practicing yoga. You might not know it, and you might not have the right t-shirt and shit, but, you know, that's what you're doing. You know, kids can do that on like a pile of rocks, you know, and we can do it in a blink of an eye when we embrace someone we love, or we see a sunset, or we, you know, we put our mat down and we forget to worry about whatever it is we're worrying about, you know.
Yeah, man. So true.
Yeah, man.
Strong words. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, people can talk about like what yoga is or what it should be or whatever until the end of time. But if it's doing good for you, like, that's all that really matters, really, in my opinion. Yeah, absolutely. If it's reminding you you're alive, this is it, isn't it? It's like, your yoga's reminding you you're alive, whether the flavors are are unpleasant or pleasant, or, you know, whatever they are, as long as it's reminding you you're alive,
it's doing its job.
Yeah, I think that's so true as well. I think, my practice is evolving like week on week, month on month. And like I say, I don't have as strict boxes as I used to, but I would say, like, say right now, I'm doing less yoga than I would usually do because I'm exploring kind of, I would say I'm more exploring mechanics at the moment, which will what effective movement is. I'm actually exploring like how to increase intensity, reduce duration, and like what that effect has on me physically. So I'm kind of exploring more of like a science thing in myself, just doing kind of self-experiment. And I think that the thing I feel like I'm always missing is the mental side of yoga when I'm doing this. And that's actually why I just go and sit on my mat. I'm not doing a physical yoga practice, but I'm going there for that space and that clarity. And the weird thing is, even though, so say you have like a crazy busy mind, right? And you're thinking about stuff all the time, which is an internal dialogue. Yoga brings you internal, but it's deeper than that dialogue, because that dialogue is still internal, even though you think the external. And it kind of like brushes that away almost. There's like an inner, isn't there? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
And
you find your essence, don't you? You find your essence within there.
Yeah, and there's just such a beauty connecting inside and just knowing that everything's okay and this is kind of what's it about. There's a huge comfort in touching that, going to that place on a regular basis. And it does make me think, like, I don't know how many times I went there before I started practicing yoga. And I'm sure I've had those moments from maybe like seeing a sunset or like surfing or else. But I think one thing that yoga does do, it teaches you to be aware of those moments as well. So like I might have felt it in the past, but you don't really know what's going on. Whereas yoga can teach you to make the most of those places as well and how to get there more efficiently, I guess.
Yeah. Well, because it's kind of like when you, it teaches you how to live, doesn't it? And we can talk about the present moment and all that kind of stuff till the cows come home, but that feeling of like being in life fully, like, is just, it's amazing, you know. And I don't know if it's just me, but it's like, you know, for a lot of my life, I lived it almost from this kind of point of view where I'm having this life, but it's from this kind of like this removed observer. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's, of course, you know. But then like you talk about surfing, it's like when you're literally in the middle of everything, and you're in the middle of all these waves and this power and this energy, and you're part of it. You know, surfing is such a good analogy for this kind of stuff, because it's like, you know, you can disappear out of this, can't you? And then all of a sudden you're part of the landscape.
Yeah.
And those are the moments that we remember, aren't they?
Yeah.
Those are the bits, if you look back, those are the bits where you string a life together, you know. Being a parent is one of those things, you know, when you pick up, I'm sure you can attest to this, you know, you pick up your newborn baby and you look at them and you're like, oh my God, what a thing of wonder, right? And for a moment you forget to worry about who you think you're supposed to be and all that kind of crap. It falls away, doesn't it? A lot of that literally falls away when you become a parent. You're like, well, you know, not all of it. There's a whole nother level of expectation and, like, you know, social conditioning that comes with it, I'm sure, and that could be a whole different podcast, right? But there is something that falls away. They say a baby always comes with a loaf of bread. Have you heard that one? Baby always comes with a loaf of bread. Someone told, it's what my friend who's also a dad told me this when my first son was born, and at the time I wasn't making very much money at all, and I was a bit worried about being able to provide. And he said, baby always comes with a loaf of bread. So what do you mean? What does that mean? And I kind of, I knew it meant, you're going to be all right and everything's going to be all right. But then I really understood it, because when a new baby arrives in the world, what do you focus on? You focus on the baby, don't you? And the love and the beauty and the wonder in that moment, right? And when you focus on the love and the beauty and the wonder, then life, everything else tends to take care of itself. Do you know what I mean? You're not focusing on worry. You're not focusing on, I need to be the person that does the thing, that gets the thing, and I'm either good or I'm bad, and I live or die by it. And I think that is a good metaphor for where our attention goes. We either go on the higher, on the love and the connection and the gratitude for being incarnate and being in this world, and being in the flowers and the sea and all that kind of stuff. Or we sink down to low, where all the suffering is, and we're like, okay, well, I'm not good enough, or I'm not powerful enough, or I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that. And we try and resolve, the perceived misgivings of our own personality. And it's like life is like, it's heaven and hell right now in our lives, isn't it?
Yeah.
And where we can be practiced enough to hold the attention in the higher. This is the fucking art form. It's like, can you hold your attention in that which is higher? Can you stay with purpose and love and connection and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I think that's really poignant what you said, heaven and hell right now, because I think we've all experienced moments where you might feel like the world's falling apart around you, and then 15 minutes later, an hour later, the next morning, like the happiest planet. Nothing's changed. You're still exactly the same. It's just a perception switch, for want of a better way of saying it. And I agree, like, becoming a dad was almost the best that happened to me. I know that's like a cliche, but in terms of really, really true cliche, the kind of simple like facets of just existence, and just being around all you love and sharing moments and sharing simple things like good food, or just a walk outside, or like you say, like a dip in the sea, or a laugh, or a hug. And that's all it is really all we need. And don't get me wrong, having the comfort and security of money and having stuff around you is nice, but you can really get tied up in all that stuff, and it only ends in suffering, really.
Yeah. And it doesn't, oddly enough, it doesn't make more stuff.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It's that it doesn't, holding your attention in that space doesn't seem to make circumstances better, does it? It's kind of like, sometimes it has the opposite effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it comes down to, I mean, this is literally not what I wanted to say because it's such a bloody yoga cliche, but I'm saying this completely external of yoga. I'm not a teacher and I don't in yoga terms, but having gratitude, right? And taking moments to actually just be like, oh, now I'm in a house, we've got heating on, we've just had dinner, there's some books around me, there's a TV, baby that's full and happy playing with his toys. Like, what more? Really feeling in that moment is I try and do it every day because it's so powerful, and it kind of strips away those feelings of, what did you say, like the small mind, small person, like these critical crushing things that we do to ourselves on a daily basis, like we all do it.
Yeah, totally, man. I had a bit of a health scare over Christmas. Turns out, and this is what one of my doctor friends and my sister, who's a nutritional therapist, turns out that I've got a kind of a histamine overload, possibly as a post-COVID. I had COVID in the summer, so possibly as a post-viral response, I got this histamine overload, and it's taken a few weeks to kind of get to the bottom of this. And I've been in my head, my mind has gone somewhere else. It's like, I'm dying. This is this is all this kind of stuff. I'm 42. I've overcooked it. I've had too much of the good life, and I'm like, And the journey I've been on through it has been, over the past few weeks, been a mad one. I've been like down in this place, and then, like you say, like boom, up here, and being like, oh my God, I'm really grateful. I'm grateful for everything, for my wife, for my kids, even my wife, like all that kind of stuff. And it's when life isn't a given, do you know what I mean? It's like you really see how precious it is, don't you? And it would be amazing if we didn't have to go to the depths to really appreciate what it is that we have, But sometimes we do, and that's just the way things are. But yeah, gratitude, kind of magic.
When you said that, I kind of visualized it as almost, it was kind of like a universe, like this. There's like this hub, this like core of existence, right? It all spreads out, and I think we find us hanging around in these like outer galaxies that don't really matter, but they consume everything and hurt us really, and they're not what counts. And then something significant happens, and it pulls you right to the point where it really matters. And moments such as like health or like worry about your family or things like that can really pull you back to that good place. And like I say, it takes negative stuff to really do that, but it's just the reality.
100%, man. I could definitely say that in my life is like there's maybe 3 or 4 moments that are noticeable, like small chunks of time that changed life for the better, but at the time were just like, what? But all of those things point back to being grateful and snapping out of whatever small perception that we get stuck in.
Yeah, for sure. I think having a baby's got to be the craziest moment in that sense. Like the power of that, just it's intense. Like you thought you knew what intense was when that head comes out, and it's like I don't know if it lessens on the second one. You're always chasing the first one, I'm guessing.
I'm trying to remember, man. Like, no, obviously, when you go from not having a child to having a child, it's like it's one of the biggest changes you can experience, isn't it? You go from looking after yourself or not, or barely looking after yourself, to kind of having responsibility for another human being. It's like 24 hours a day is pretty intense. Second time round, we were a lot more chilled. We were like, and I think that was imprinted in our second son's nervous system, that we were like, we've done this before. We don't, they relax a little bit because they know what they're doing. Whereas the first one's like, these guys don't know what they're doing. Fuck. Yeah, basically, you're being old-handed at this time, mate.
Yeah, I feel super relaxed, like, already. Being a parent is a journey, and it really takes as a human being, doesn't it? Really,
it's a very human thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap this up with a question. So, a simple one, but a challenging one. So what does movement mean to you?
Movement mean to me? Good question. I guess it's like nourishment, isn't it? You nourish yourself with movement. I think when I was much younger, I would practice yoga to the point of trying to attain something, be it like poses or, just to be better and be a better teacher and all the rest of it. And my movement practice at the moment it's much more like real life situations, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you're into like Gota and Weck and all that kind of stuff, and like
Spiral. I've never heard of it. I'll check it out.
I'll send you some stuff, man. I'll send you some stuff. But the other day I've been doing some stuff. It's quite interesting. It's about how you move force through your feet and how you turn on your fourth and fifth toe and all that kind of stuff. And I've been practicing it, and along with gymnastic rings and mace and rope and all the stuff that I love doing. Mm-hmm. And then I found myself, I was climbing up some rocks and I was holding my youngest, who is 3 years old. And it's the first time I was like, oh my God, this is really, like, my practice has really gone into, my ability to move as a human being. Like, it was the first time I went, because obviously you see like muscle development, and you're like, I'm strong and I can do this and I can do that. But actually in the real world, I'm balancing on some quite scary rocks. I'm having to hold my kid because he could fall to his death. And I'm moving like a goat. And I was like, this is what it's about. Do you know what I mean? It's like taking quite a long time to get there. But I was like, this is what it's about. It's like, it's about being able to move in three-dimensional space, being able to respond to the things that life throws at you, and to do it with ease and joy in your own physicality,
Yeah,
I guess that's what it is for me, man.
I'd usually finish now, but I kind of had a similar moment of that last week as well. And I think it was honestly the first time I'd ever felt it. And basically, when we shot at Stretch and Sam, who we shot the film with,
yeah,
I need to send you the video anyway. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on the website. But Sam, his movement is just unbelievable. It's like watching a body that is just how it was meant to move. Like the anatomy of the human body, like all abilities, like that's how Sam moves. And I was just so incredibly inspired by it. And it was the first time there's so much exposure to movement on like Instagram or whatever. And it was the first time in ages I was kind of like, it opened so many new doors to me. And I was super, super inspired, but I thought in my head, I was kind of like, I'll never move like that. This like limiting belief. And since then I've kind of been very intuitive, explorative, like no poses or or anything, just moving in a way that he kind of wants to, like innate. And I've been kind of doing it, not, that throughout the day. And then last week we had this photo shoot, and it was just new trousers that we've just released. And in my head, I was like, I'll do some lifestyle stuff. Like I'll do a few yoga poses, like the usual. And I just decided to move in this way that Sam had inspired me to move, in this completely
wicked,
natural, inhibited way. And it was crazy. Like I actually just could not believe how accessible my body was. And in so many ways, I'm not practicing Mysore every day nowadays. Like I'm not doing loads of calisthenics. I literally just training like just to kind of like feel good and stay healthy, right? But my body just let me into these spaces that I couldn't believe were accessible given the current level of practice that I'm doing. And it was just kind of like you had then. I was like, man, like I'm like I don't know, like I'm trying to think of an equivalent animal to an equivalent animal to a goat that's like jumping around on a beach. But whatever that animal is, I felt, whoa, I'm free right now. I'm free. And everything I've put into this over the last, like, you know, however many years, 13 years I've been practicing movement and the rest, come to this moment and my body's going, yeah, like, let's do this. And it probably wasn't that impressive to someone watching, but it was incredible. I think it super resonate with what you said about movement and how it just allows you to move your body in the way that it's designed to.
Fantastic, mate. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, sweet. Thank you so much for chatting. It's been awesome. I think your insights are incredible. I always like chatting to hearing what you've got to say. And yeah, we should do it again sometime. Chat about something else. Going to some.
Yeah, wicked, mate. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, man. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Nice one, bro.